Iuh toa in Tlalocan, mochipa tlacelia, mochipa tlatzmolini, mochipa xopantla, tlaxopanmani. From ancient times to the present day, the realm of Talocan has fascinated Aztec imaginings of the worlds beyond the Earth's surface. So, what is this place? This Eye of the Serpent episode will talk about where Talocan was, who ruled it, who could go there, and why Talocan has mattered to Aztec people for centuries. This video will also have an exclusive English take on the legendary journey of the Aztec princess Quetzalpetlatl to this watery domain, with sections I have translated from the Nahuatl language. To understand the reality of the Mesoamerican universe, we must first be aware that it was permeable and porous, opened by portals at sacred points upon the Earth's surface. Mountain peaks and ceiba trees touched the heavens. Dark caves and deep wells plunged into the underworld. These beliefs could have begun as early as the Olmec, the earliest major civilization of Mesoamerica. Over 3,000 years ago, the Olmec settled the southern Gulf of Mexico wetlands, where they built massive ceremonial and political structures. The Olmec version of the ball court may symbolize the threshold to the watery depths beneath the Earth's surface, a frequent idea among the later cities of the ancient Maya. Other Native American civilizations of the Mesoamerican culture area also explored the belief of a vast aquatic world beneath our own. Lavish murals hint at images of this place from Teotihuacan, the site of the pyramids. Water ripples across the surface of a paradise-like land, with bounteous trees and abundant life. Here the water goddess appears in center to preside over the domain. For centuries the Maya also spoke of a world below the world, one filled with dark waters and scary caverns. Their most vivid account told of dim paths, great caves, and water passages in Xibalba, the place of fright, the land of the dead. This description comes from the Popol Vuh, the epic myth of the Quiche Maya of Guatemala, which I detail in another video. Special sites of power on Earth could access the underworld, and for the Maya these included mountains, caves, and wells. Deep spring wells pit the north end of the Yucatan Peninsula. The Yucatec Maya called them Cenote or Cenote in popular culture. These were holes in the world, and beneath their waters were entrances to the realms of gods and spirits. The Maya offered the sacred beings their riches and sacrifices by casting them into such pools. Archaeologists have since recovered many of these gifts, most famous among them those from Chichen Itza. But it was the Aztecs who have given us the most detailed description of the aquatic kingdom below the earth. They called the realm Tlalocan, the place of Tlaloc. Tlaloc, the Aztec rain god, governed this underworld land with his wife, the freshwater goddess Chaltihuitl-Ique, whose name means she wears a jade skirt. Other mythical beings inhabiting this world were the four Tlaloque, minor Tlalocs, each stationed at a corner representing a cardinal direction, to cast rain from his respective point. Many Mesoamerican myths divided the Earth's surface into four quarters, each associated with a basic color and presiding deity. Returning to the Maya, the Chahcop rain gods of Yucatan were also reckoned to work for each of the Earth's four corners. Even to the present day, Yucatec Maya villagers build altars with a four-way arch to represent the world's corners, and a child sits at each table leg to represent the Chahcop. From ancient to modern times, in myth and in ritual, the Mesoamerican rain gods often had a group of four to handle the cardinal directions. In Aztec thought, Tlalocan was a place for gods, spirits, and souls alike. It was one of several afterworlds allotted to the deceased, and it was one of the more pleasant ones at that. Entry into this world was reserved for people who die by water, drowning, lightning, dropsy, and even diarrhea. A shocking fact of the ancient Aztec afterlife was that where you went depended on not how you lived, but rather how you died. The gods chose who could come to Tlalocan, and so they would send a water death at the moment they saw proper. But as we will see in the next part, there was also a chance for rebirth. Dwarves could also arrive into Tlalocan because they had existed on Earth in diminutive forms, likenesses of the four Tlaloque. Bernardino de Sahagun, a friar active in Mexico City during the late 16th century, related a marvelous tale of a woman's visit to Tlalocan in his Primeros Memoriales, or first memoranda of Aztec culture. The account told of a princess named Quetzalpetlatl, Quetzal Feathermat, from the city of Tlatelolco. In the year 1507, a bout of diarrhea had left her for dead. But because this was a water-based fatality, the rites forbade cremation, and she was simply buried instead. During this near-death experience, the noblewoman found herself approaching a lush, green land draped in mist. She was indeed arriving at Tlalocan, for she was at that moment one of the deceased. A young man then appeared to guide her through a series of trials, such as avoiding contact with a couple ominous lizards, or speaking to a group of weaving women, on her way to enter the kingdom. Flapping overhead were paper banners spattered with rubber, insignia for this place and for its ruler Tlaloc, identified in the story as Tlaloca Tecutli, the Lord of Tlalocan. The young guide led her to meet Tlaloc, described as an elderly, toothless man, in an ironic deviation from his famous visage with a row of long upper fangs. He then informed the Lord that their guest would not be a permanent resident, for she was only visiting to promptly return with the living. At Tlaloc's royal court, she witnessed a troop of dancing Tlaloc deities, a gathering of high and regular priests, and an ensemble of young noble children. A fascinating moment came from this encounter. Princess Quetzalpetlatl recognized her stepson from among the deceased children. When she saw him, Tlaloc himself told her that this little hummingbird, a familiar metaphor for the soul of the deceased, would soon be reborn into the world. It follows Aztec beliefs that children who died early would remain in limbo until their time to return to the earth and once again attempt a complete life. And then came time for Quetzalpetlatl herself to revive upon the earth. Before her departure, the guide asked Tlaloc to grant her a gift, to take with her back to the world of the living. The following passage is from the story's original Nahuatl. Niman sem istetontli im petlacaltontli ielpan konakili. Auch niemand sentet shoshoki in shikali in kimakaske. Niemand kilkike o ka yewat in dikwas, in dikis, inig dite patis, in tlal dikpak. Akan dikpinawatis, in tlaloka tekutli. Atmo sa yeyo in onka, in iashka. In itlaki, in motlamachtia, in moquilto noa, mochitlacatl, in motolinia, in tikpatis, yewatl, inik kinawati. The account ends after a brief mention of the Aztec kings who dwelled on the netherworld plains beyond Tlalocan. We may assume that Princess Quetzalpetlatl eventually returned to the earth and began to practice ritual medicine, per the instructions she received in the watery paradise. These final parts of the surviving story are classic points of shamanic vocation. From Arctic Canada to Tierra del Fuego, a shaman often begins his or her career through a near-death experience. During this critical moment, their consciousness is in another state as they experience soul travel into the worlds beyond. When they arrive into these places, they meet supernatural beings such as gods and spirits that will share knowledge and abilities with the initiates before they reawaken, on the condition that they begin the practice of communicating between the human and spirit realms. This is exactly what Quetzalpetlatl underwent during her episode of death, so that her soul could travel to Tlalocan to receive spiritual gifts from its divine lords, then return to the earth transformed into a healer. To the present day, Tlalocan remains an important site for soul travel among Aztec shamans, notably in the forested Sierra range of North Puebla. These communities speak a dialect of Nahuatl that replaces most of the tl with t, so the mythical land is there called Talocan. Anthropologist Timothy Knab's writings on the modern accounts of Talocan present the most developed exploration of this underworld domain, recalling common Mesoamerican beliefs of a deep, subterranean network of caves filled with watery pockets and abundant growth. And just as in the writings for the Mexica Aztec Primeros Memoriales and the Quiche Maya Popol Vuh, contemporary journeys into Talocan detail encounters with a population of supernatural beings, some beneficial, others malevolent. I described Knab's own psychic travels within Talocan in my video on his book A War of Witches, and I linked to his article on Sierra Nahuatl folklore in the description box below. From past to present, Talocan was not just a myth about the afterlife lands, but also a source for ritual power. The journey of Princess Quetzalpetlatl shows how the gods choose whom they want in their watery world, whether to stay as a timeless denizen or to begin with a shaman's career. Aztec healers in modern Puebla could access Talocan to continue such spiritual work, notably through the experience of soul travel through self-guided dreaming. In this lucid dream state, the healer may need to search through this underworld for a patient's soul that has been too long separated from their waking body. The soul must be found and redirected to the body to restore the patient's mental, physical, and social health. The reality of Talocan may also be invoked to summon its power for ritual ends. The 1629 treatise by Hernando Ruiz de Alarcón, while the controversial source for colonial Aztec magic and religion, has an extraordinary ritual spell to prevent garden damage by coatis of all things. Like many of the other spells in this work, this one evokes a mythical episode to charge the metaphoric working with magical force. The spell first likens the damaged garden to the anthill of the Lord of Tlalocan. It then demands that the coatis be taken away to a field where they may eat their own crops without spoiling the present one further. And at last, the incantation seals the deal by summoning the priests of the corners of Tlalocan, each marked with its distinct color. The following verses come from the original Nahuatl. Ayak nikan nesis, ayak nikan mokawas, kipiyaske in tlamakaske shoshowik Tlalocan, istak Tlalocan, gosawik Tlalocan, kipiyeske. Through myth, magic, and metaphor, the spell brings the presence of Tlalocan itself to defend the garden against intruding coatis, themselves compared to elderly gods. As we have already seen from Aztec and Maya culture, powerful figures dwell in the aquatic underworld, and many rituals are dedicated to reaching out to the threshold sites between the earth above and waters below, to petition their governing forces for rain. Our final example for this video will illustrate this premise with today's mask. Today's mask presents a classic image of the Sirena. Many indigenous communities in Mexico continue to worship a goddess of fresh water, recalling the ancient Aztec Chaltihuitlique mentioned earlier. While the Sirena has taken the familiar form of the European mermaid, worship to her follows Mesoamerican beliefs of water deities dwelling in places underground. In the Huasteca lowlands west of the Gulf Coast, her most famous seat is within Mount Postectli in the township of Chicontepec, Veracruz. For decades, native communities such as the Aztec and Otomi have taken pilgrimages to this sacred mountain to give her ritual offerings. If the Sirena is properly paid, she will respond with ample rains for the growing crops. An Otomi shaman once told me that, in addition, wasting her precious water offends her, and she would react with hurricanes and tidal waves. The Sirena is therefore approached with respect and reverence because of her central role as a provider of rains, which she brings out from the water realm beneath the earth's surface. Since thousands of years ago, the idea of Talocan still impresses upon the Mesoamerican imagination. Please like, share, and subscribe to the Eye of the Serpent channel for updates. Your Patreon support goes toward travel, research, and production. Thank you for watching, and good roads.